Today we're looking at session number 12 in Micah, looking at chapter 4, verses 9 through 13. This will finish chapter 4, as I recall. In verse 9, where we begin, Micah makes a very abrupt change of tempo from the exalted glory state of Jerusalem and Israel in the end times to the upcoming captivity and exile. And this would be the Babylonian captivity and exile. He makes a steep descent from the mountaintop to the valley of despair. Remember, each of these begins with a call to listen. Then it shows the judgment that's coming. Then finally he winds up each section of each of the three oracles with a statement of hope. It's as if Micah here has said, hey guys, it's time to get real about where we are right now. All of what he's going to follow with has been foreshadowed earlier. Micah keeps saying something and then he'll repeat it and then he'll repeat it. It's sort of like the old military teaching on how you teach. You, first of all, you have what's called primacy, the first thing you tell them. And then you have recency, the last thing you tell them. These are key issues. And then you have frequency, which is the thing you tell them most often. So the military would say when you're teaching, you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you just got through telling them. So take that for what you wish. Micah 1:13 told us of some of this that was coming. It says, harness the chariot to the team of horses, O inhabitant of Lachish, which Lachish sounds a bit like steed, as I recall. She was the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion, because in you were found the rebellious acts of Israel, that is, of the northern kingdom. So it says, Judah, you're just as bad as the northern kingdom is, and evidently Lachish had some part in making that or bringing that about. Micah's time was not the time for false security that was being spouted by the false prophets. Let's look at Micah 4:9 now as we get into today's study. Micah 4:9. Now, why do you cry out loudly? Is there no king among you? And the answer, of course, in the captivity, there's not going to be a king any longer in Judah. Or has your counselor perished? The king was a form of counselor. That agony has gripped you like a woman in childbirth. In other words, he says, there's no king above you, there's no about you or with you, there's nobody around that's going to help you, give you advice, going to lead you, and it's going to be as painful as a woman in childbirth, which, of course, that pain does not stop until the child is born. Something coming about that eventually. The captivity and exile meant that Israel, either part of them actually, but here he's speaking probably about the combined government, had no king, therefore no government. It was dissolved by Babylon. There was a last king sitting on the throne of David. I believe his name was Jeconiah, and that he was it. Nebuchadnezzar came in, set in another king, Zedekiah, who was of the line of David, as I recall, but he was not in the line for being king, but he was made king by Nebuchadnezzar. He was a vassal king. He paid tribute to Nebuchadnezzar until he decided not to. And then, of course, that set everything in motion. Babylon was not going to tolerate Zedekiah's rebellion. The counselor, again, is a parallel reference to the king. And the fact that there was no counselor meant there was no king. And that was true. So Judah would no longer have a king to mediate God's law while in captivity in Babylon. Not only would they have no king to mediate the law, they would also have no temple in which to do worship as God had declared should be done. So they were going to be on the outside in the secular world of Judah and of the religious world of Judah. They would not be effectively under a covenant relationship there. They would be outside the covenant community, to an extent at least. And would God give up on them in that sense? No, he's not, but they're going to pay a price to get back into the covenant community. Judah would have no temple to permit her to worship properly. So she can't worship. She has no leader, no king to lead. Everything normal and regular was gone. There was no more. The national pain was one that would not go away or cease until the captivity ended, until the child was born. The people may even have thought God's promised Messiah was no longer viable either, because this was a terrible time in Judah, at the time spoken about in Lamentations, for example. However, they probably, those from Judah in captivity, probably had no clue at that point that the captivity and exile were God's faithfully keeping his promises, as found in Deuteronomy 28:29, so forth. The promise that violation of the covenant's requirements would result in cursing and removal from the land. So this is something that God told them up front. Moses gave them that before he passed on. So they knew the two choices were be obedient to the covenant requirements and be blessed coming, going in every possible way. Violate the covenant's requirements and you would be cursed every way. So Judah was to experience extreme suffering and pain, but she was not being thrown under the bus because God hadn't given up on her. His love caused him to be faithful to his promises, even the promises of cursing for disobedience. Micah continued with that metaphor. He's going to emphasize the pain and suffering to come as of then the unrepentant Judeans. So you've got pain and suffering coming to you, he says, as long as you're unrepentant. When you repent, then you will be restored. That's going to be his message. Let's look at verse 10 of chapter 4. Writhe and labor to give birth, daughter of Zion, that's Jerusalem, like a woman in childbirth. For now you will go out of the city. You're going to be exiled out of Jerusalem. You will dwell in the field. That will be your journey as you're walked down to Babylon. and you will end up going to Babylon. There you will be rescued. So this is not being thrown under the bus. It isn't permanent. There will be a point of rescue. Then the Lord, then Yahweh will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. So what's he saying? There's hope at the end of this dark tunnel. God's going to come and take you out of captivity and restore you to Judah. So, what do we have? The exit from Jerusalem to exile is portrayed as a three-step journey. You're going to leave the city, you're going to be along the way, that's in the field, and finally you're going to arrive at exile in Babylon. So leave the city, be on the journey, end up in Babylon. Keep in mind that Micah's prophecy probably took place before 722 BC, which was when the northern kingdom was destroyed by Assyria. Micah's the book appears to be written right before that time, at least portions of it were, and that's nearly 150 years before the captivity he's now speaking about and the exile to Babylon actually took place. So Micah's writing about 150 years in the future. At the time of Micah's writing, Babylon was not in any position of power. So, I mean, the idea that Babylon was going to be the power wasn't even thought about. So, and it wouldn't allow them to do what Micah's indicating. So Assyria was the dominant force in the region, and Babylon had not yet begun its rise to power. And when it did, of course, the first thing Babylon would do was to take out Assyria. That would be its major threat. So you take it out first, then you can go and do as you please. At least that's the idea. But the good news, your exile, Micah writes, will just be temporary. It's temporary only. Yahweh will redeem and restore Israel. Then Micah appeared to jump ahead to the end times at Christ's return. So he's jumping 150 years ahead to the captivity and exile. Now he's going to jump who knows how far in the future, because we're still awaiting Christ's return at the end times. So let's look at Micah 4:11. And now many nations have been assembled against you. Speaking of Jerusalem, of course. And this was related to the Battle of Armageddon and the end times defeat attempts by all Gentile nations to wipe out Israel. And that's the time that Christ will return, saying it ain't going to happen. And now many nations have been assembled against you, who say, let her be polluted. That's the nations gathered to do battle against Israel, Judah, and Jerusalem in particular. Let our eyes gloat over Zion. So it says here, these guys think they got it made. They can take Israel out. They can take Jerusalem out and just say, yeah, it's going to be good, guys. We're going to do it. The timing seems, again, to be about the same as the timing of Armageddon in the end times. Look at Revelation 16, verse 16. And they gathered them, the nations, together to the place which in Hebrew is called Harmageddon. Harmagedon. Harmageddon rather than Armageddon. Same point, though. And if we jump to chapter 19, verse 19, I'm not sure about the double 16, 16, 19, 19. We're even going to have a 14, 14 in a moment. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies assembled to make war against him, that's Christ, at his return, who sat upon the horse, and against his army. This would be the army of angels, and when he comes back to return, the elect will come with him also. And another version related in Zechariah 14:14. So we had Revelation 16:16, Revelation 19:19. Now we have Zechariah 14:14. I'm not saying there's anything about 14:14 versus 14:26 or something. It's a curious thing. And Judah also will fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be gathered, gold and silver and garments in great abundance. So both John in Revelation and Zechariah in the Old Testament, just before the intertestamental period, all saying roughly the same thing. Everything is going to be focused on Israel and Jerusalem in particular. But God has a surprise in order for those nations who say they're going to gloat over Israel, and he's going to do something. Zechariah speaks about that in 14:3. Says, then Yahweh will go forth and fight against those nations, and when he fights, on a day of battle. So Yahweh is going to be the victorious victor or victorious gladiator fighting for Israel. And of course that will be Jesus Christ in his return. In Psalm 2, the psalm writer describes another situation where nations were conspiring against the plans of Yahweh. I'm looking at Psalm 2 and looking at verses 1 through 4. Why are the nations in an uproar, and the peoples devising a vain thing? This is God speaking. The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against Yahweh and against his anointed. Guess who that is? Let us tear their fetters apart. And this is the nations now speaking. Let us tear Yahweh and his anointed's fetters apart and cast away their cords from us. In other words, they said, let's break away from all of those things that they're keeping us under wraps with. He who sits in the heavens, now we're going back to Yahweh. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. The nations spoke in ignorance, according to Micah. In verse 12 of chapter 4, Micah says, but they do not know the thoughts of Yahweh. They do not understand his purpose, for he has gathered them like sheaves to the threshing floor. He's saying, they're coming in saying, we're going to whip Israel, we're going to take down Jerusalem, we're going to gloat over it. And he said, yeah, my point, God's point is he's gathering them so that he can thresh them. He's gathering like gathering the wheat into the barns to beat them down, to separate the wheat from the chaff. Just a few verses earlier, Micah had already predicted Yahweh's intervention, turning the tables with Israel returning to exaltation and domination. In other words, he's saying, I've already told you that Yahweh is going to intervene here. He's going to turn things over. Israel will be returned. It will be exalted. It will be dominant. Someone has called that day the bright morning of Zion's glory. This goes back to Micah 4:8. As for you, tower of the flock, that's the people, hill of the daughter of Zion, that's Jerusalem, to you it will come, even the former dominion will come, the kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem. He said, just think back to what it was like when David and Solomon were king. You're going to be exalted like that, even above that. Again. So Micah's been going at these things right along. We we get to one point, we have to go back and see that he's already talked about this. But the idea of being threshed is not a pretty picture. In other words, the nations are gathering thinking they're going to have a feast at Israel, and God said, no, you're going to be threshed. Micah 4:13. Arise and thresh, daughter of Zion, for your horn I will make iron, and your hoofs I will make bronze. He said, I'm going to make you like a metallic horse, strong, powerful, crushing, that you may pulverize many peoples, that you may devote to Yahweh their unjust gain. All that wealth that's going to be gathered, it's coming to Yahweh. Their wealth to the Lord of all the earth. There's some irony in Micah's last verse of chapter 4. What the nations got by aggression and oppression, Yahweh will give to Israel so that she may be offering it back to him as a sacrifice. So God says, they took it from you and everybody else. You will take it from them, and you will give it to me as an offering in worship to me, Yahweh. And Israel's God is the supreme sovereign of all the earth. Never forget that. That's what the nations forgot in Psalm 2 when they plotted to throw off all the requirements and say, we're not accountable to God or to his anointed, which in that day would have been the king, probably David, for example. But in the time when this is going to take place in the future, that will be the Messiah, Jesus, our Christ. And in accomplishing this last go-round, Yahweh will make Israel strong like an animal with metal extremities, with which to make quick work of the threshing. And it will be a complete threshing, and they will have booty that they will offer in worship to Yahweh. Just one more reminder of God's warning to nations and Israel and individuals. Don't mess with Israel. Don't mess with Abraham's offspring. Don't mess with my people. Well, where do we go next? Well, we go down to chapter 5, and we'll see the future of Zion as Zion will see it. This is now we're going to be focusing primarily, although not exclusively, primarily on the offer of hope that Micah gives as the end of this second oracle. Then chapters 6 and 7 will follow with the third oracle, and then we will be one day finished with Micah. But Micah had a lot to say. He said it often. He said it repeatedly. So Micah was a fantastic teacher. The first thing he told us, the last thing he told us, and the thing he told us